Hey guys, welcome to J.T. Engineering, and in this episode, we're going to be continuing to work on my 2.5-inch Fitchburg Northern live steam engine. If you're following this build series at all, you'll know that in the last video, we worked on the tender frame and got everything decked. We got the frame completely assembled, the deck we installed, and so now what we need is we need to assemble our tender tank, which is going to carry our water and fuel as we roll down the track and supply the locomotive with much needed resources. In this video, you're going to see me not build just one tender tank, but I'm actually going to be building a second one. This second tank is a 36-inch tank, and this is for a solar 10-wheeler that I just recently purchased. So 2 tender tanks being built in this video means that there's 2 steam engines that are going to be built on this channel. So hit subscribe if you want to follow along with that. You can see that I've already got these 2 tender tanks put together. In this video, I'm going to show you how I assembled both of these tender tanks using the Allen Models kit. So if you're building one of these tenders in your garage, or just want to see how these tender tanks are built, this is going to be a great video for you. So why don't we go ahead and get building. So to get started on this tender, the first thing we need to do is we need to get them all out of the box. And 1, make sure we have all the parts. And 2, the instructions say to give both sides of the sheets a nice sand with 80 grit sandpaper. And then because these holes are laser cut, pass a number 40 drill bit through these to make sure that there's no burrs and that the rivets won't get stuck in there. So we'll go ahead and pull all these parts out of the box, make sure we've got everything, give everything a nice sand on both sides, and then go through all the holes with a number 40 drill bit. I need something to open the box. Empty box, check. Empty box, check. All right, here we go. As I unpacked the box with all the tender parts in it, I was ensuring that it was all there and making sure that all the parts were in good condition. The instructions tell you to sand all the sheets with sandpaper and clear all the laser cut holes for the rivets with a number 40 drill bit to remove any burrs from the laser cutting process. Personally, I think waiting to clear all the rivet holes is way easier to do when the tender is clecoed together. You can clear 2 holes at once and know without a doubt that they will line up when it comes time to drive your rivets. So if you want to save yourself some time, I'd recommend clearing all the rivet holes as you cleco and build the tender. I've got the tender, all the holes are drilled, we cleared all that out, and I just put some clecos in it and kind of mocked it all up to just kind of get an idea of how it all goes together. So now that I've done this, we can go ahead and start getting ready to actually rivet this thing together. A big reason I decided to cleco this whole thing together is because I needed to make sure that the ribs were in the correct position. And this is a little bit important because all of these little rivet holes right here are just faux rivets, meaning they don't actually hold anything together. So I wanted to make sure that I left these holes available that attach these baffles on the inside of the tender. I didn't want to accidentally drive in a cosmetic rivet in the wrong spot. So I just marked these with a Sharpie. I'll put all these cosmetic rivets in, and then when I've done that on both sides and all of these pieces have this brass strip, then we'll start riveting the tender body itself together. These brass strips that are on the inside of the tender are what your tender top is going to sit on, which is what you are going to sit on. So those are a little bit important to make sure that the structure is there. Another reason I clecoed this all together and mocked it up is I wanted to make sure that these baffles were sitting in the correct spot. In the drawing, it shows the baffle. The edge of it should be right here where the water inlet is, and then there's another one right in this area where your nice little fat ass is gonna go. So you wanna make sure that that's extra strong. Now all that was left to do was to start driving some cosmetic rivets, and let me tell you, there is definitely a learning curve to this. We have our first row of cosmetic rivets in the tender. Now, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. This is my first time riveting, and this channel is all about learning and growth. This is the first one I started with, and you can see that it is f***ed up. But as I went down the line, I slowly kind of learned and got a feel for it, and I'm pretty happy with how they are over here at the very end. I think they're still a little bit long. I can't cut them any shorter with my rivet cutter, but I think this is gonna suffice. So just really quick, it was a little bit of a learning curve with learning how much pressure. So I've got my air compressor set to 40 pounds for the air hammer, and then I just have this rivet cutter that I bought off of Amazon. It doesn't cut them quite short enough. This is a good time in the video to talk about the correct rivet length. The rule of thumb for finding the correct rivet length is the thickness of the materials being riveted together plus 1.5 times the diameter of the rivet itself. My rivet cutter doesn't cut my rivets nearly short enough, so I just kind of had to make do with the shortest cut setting. If you want more information on how to drive solid rivets, I included a link to another YouTuber's video in the description of this video that greatly helped me understand the process of riveting solid rivets like this, so check that out if you want to learn something from somebody that actually knows what they're talking about. Anyways, now that we've talked about rivet lengths a little bit, let's get back to the build. This might be a little bit difficult to show on camera, but I kind of wanted to mention just how I was driving these rivets. So you're going to need a bucking bar and an air hammer, at least that's how I'm doing it. I bought the bucking bar from Loco Parts. I'm not really sure what this is. This little dished end is so if you want rivets that are rounded on the inside of the tender, you can use this. I don't really give a shit about that. No one's ever gonna see it. So I've just been using the back of this. All this is just a piece of 1x2 tubing that looks like about an 1/8 inch thick. And you wanna set it on here square. And then I've just been giving it one solid push. And that seems to be holding it just fine. So I have found that to be easier. Some people will go and they know how many times to push the trigger for a squish, but for me, just the one solid push has been working just fine. And now we're off to the races, finishing up the cosmetic rivets on the tender sides. I'm really thankful that I did the cosmetic rivets first and used them as a learning experience. Being able to learn how to drive a bunch of rivets before having to do anything that's actually structural or important allowed me to make some mistakes, refine my technique, and try it again. So if you're planning on building a tender like this and haven't riveted before, this is a great place to learn the feel and some techniques before moving on to the more critical stuff. We have finished all of our cosmetic rivets on both sides. Now we're going to be moving on to putting these brass angle iron strips on. Before we start riveting in the brass angle on the other side, I want to just talk a little bit about this because this is somewhere where you could kind of get messed up. So you can see we have these baffles in the middle. Now to be able to put them in, you can't just slide them in easily with the angle installed. So what I'm getting at is I would recommend putting in your angle on both sides, but do not rivet either side panel to the floor pan because you want to be able to move them around and slide in your baffles, because if you go ahead and rivet everything together like this and you don't put your baffles in, there's these little cutouts that are designed where the brass is going to go through here. You can see it like this, and you will not be able to get this baffle into the tender with these connected and it completely riveted to the bottom. So I'm going to move over to this side and install my brass angle here. In the instructions, it says to do this off of the floor pan. I have found it really helpful, actually, that I have it all cleat-coed together. It's just a lot easier for me to get in here and rivet on the back of this rather than having to figure out a way to like put it on the table and angle it. So it's worked really well for me. That's just technique. Follow the instructions if you want. I'm kind of just winging it. As I stated just a second ago, riveting these brass strips to the tender sides while it was cleat-coed together was way easier than doing it while it was sitting on the table. The edge of the bucking bar fit under the angle iron really nicely and made driving these rivets a pretty easy part of this project. So I would highly recommend doing it this way if you can. We've got our brass angle in on the side panels, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to put the baffles in. You can see I'm removing these cleat-coes, and I'm just going to take off this side panel on this side, and then slide the baffles in, rivet it to that side, and then we'll put this side panel back on and rivet it to the baffles. So I'm just gonna swing this around in here, there we go. I'm just gonna drive it to just kind of hold everything in place. That worked pretty good. There, that's better. Finish driving this one. Perfect. Before we attach either of these to the side sheets, we wanna get both baffles in, so I'll drop that one in there. All right, just like that, we've got our baffles installed. We're ready to finally rivet this side panel on. I decided that I'm gonna go all the way along the bottom, and then I've also aligned these corners here, so I'm pretty much just gonna rivet all of this in, and then I'll do the same thing on this side and kind of mirror what I'm doing. Transition to the back, and I think all of this in here I'm gonna wait to do until I've finished the rest of it because it's a little more complex and I'll have a little bit more experience driving rivets, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. You can see that I started by riveting the radiused water leg to the front of the side sheet and then worked my way along the bottom of the tender. This is a good time to showcase why I think clearing your holes now instead of before the assembly is a great idea. You can see in this shot that I'm using a number 40 drill bit to clear both the tender side sheet and the floor pan holes all at once. This was much easier to do in this configuration, and it also ensures your holes will definitely line up. When I had finished riveting the bottom, I then worked my way up the rear corner piece and finished riveting the side sheet. I then mirrored this process on the other side of the tender, and with that complete, I could shift my focus to the rear panel of the tender. I have driven all the rivets on both sides, and I gotta say, it's looking pretty good. I'm really starting to see the vision for the Fitchburg Northern. So now that the sides are done and the baffles are all in, I'm gonna go ahead and scoot around and just rivet the backside in here, as well as the brass angle strip that'll support the back of the top plate. Riveting the back of the tender is exactly the same as riveting the sides. I started on one corner, worked my way down, then along the bottom and back up the other side. In this step, I also riveted the brass strip to the rear of the tender sheet. With the rear of the tender buttoned up, there was a little more work to do on the corners before we could move up to the front water legs. We've got all of our rivets in the rear sheet, but there's still a couple that we need to install here on the corners. Now, the floor pan or the bottom sheet does not have the holes pre-drilled, so I'm just gonna bring my drill bit in here and just give it a clear out, just like that on one and on the other. So this is where it's gonna get a little bit tricky. You can see I'm gonna have to get my bucking bar all the way down here in this corner. This bucking bar I bought from Loco Parts. You can see it's all beat up because I've been using the 1x2 stock as the bucking bar, but now I'm gonna be using this. So I'm just gonna stick this down in here, just like so. I'll back the end of the rivet into here and send it, and I guess we'll just see what happens. Are you guys silly? I'm still gonna send it. Only like 4 of you are gonna get that reference, but that's okay. I enjoyed it. Survey says that actually went a lot better than expected. I think because there's so many other rivets in here it's really not that important. This isn't super structural, but we're gonna finish it out anyways. Do the best that we can and try to learn something along the way. All right, we've got these 2 holes up here which don't attach to anything. They're just cosmetic, so I'll just do the same thing that I did. These are below the top sheet you'll sit on, so you're never gonna see these anyways if they look like crap. Like that one does. Oh, that one did not go well. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o. If you watch my channel enough, you know that I make a lot of mistakes, and you can see that this rivet is no exception. I really messed that one up. So for those of you at home that also have no idea what you're doing, I have found that actually just using a claw hammer to remove some of these has worked fairly well, as long as the back of the head hasn't been flared out too much. Like that one I was able to pull out. Some of them I've been using a Dremel to cut, but this works just fine as well. That is good enough. So since we're on this corner, you can see we've got a little gap here in the top. That's what these little pieces are for. Now this is gonna be just a little bit tricky. You can see there's no holes drilled in here, but there is holes drilled here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna bring this little corner piece in here. I'm gonna grab myself a quick grip, and I'm just gonna try and clamp it only on the top, leaving me enough room that I can drill the bottom of this hole. These corner pieces sort of work. They're not perfect, but we should be able to force them into compliance here. Bring one over here for this side as well, and I'm leaving the bottom hole exposed. That'll work. Put a cleco in it, move the clamp. And now bring in my drill bit, just the bottom one right now. There we go. Just gonna bring in a rivet here. That looks pretty good. Now this is visible, so if you care what your rivets look like, this is a good time to deal with it. And when I did drill that out, it looks like I got a little bit of flashing on the back of this, so I'm gonna clean that out and then we'll send the rivets home. All right, I got the flashing removed on the back side. I haven't drilled any of these other holes, and that's mostly because I can't quite get in there with the cleco still stuck in there. Now this is a little bit interesting because this is visible after the sheet is in on the back side. I'm gonna use this part of the bucking bar to make a little round rivet head because it's visible. I haven't been doing that on any of the other ones, but the other ones have just been kind of smushed flat, but then if we hit it with this little round dish after that, it'll make a really nice looking round rivet, at least it should in theory. Wow, that actually worked pretty well. It's not perfect, but nothing that I do ever is. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You can see here, if I can get my camera to focus, that it rounded off the back of that rivet head, whereas all of these other ones that I've been doing, I've just left flat. So this is kind of neat to do on parts of the tender that are gonna be visible with the top sheet installed. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing here. And if you can see this on camera, you can see that I didn't quite deburr this enough because there's a little bit of steel junk that's hanging off the back of there that I didn't get all the way filed off. So I'm going to pull this cleco and really get that filed down there well. And I think we should have some nice looking corners there when this is all completed. I'm going to do my best to get this on camera so that you guys can kind of understand what I'm saying. So in the bottom of this, there's a little dish. So what I do is I'm just setting my rivet in here, sliding it in, and I've been driving these home a little bit slower than all the rest of them and just kind of watching how the rivet tail forms here. So I'm just using the dish stand, setting it on here, and I'm just going to kind of send it home, but send it home slowly. That one was not great. I kind of squished the rivet head down a little bit, but I mean, the rest of them look decent. I don't know. I guess I'm happy with them. It is what it is. These back corners, I think, look pretty good. Everything's all riveted in. The rounded rivets look meh, but it'll work. The real things weren't perfect, and neither is mine. So I'm just being prototypical with my shitty craftsman skills. So now we're going to move around to the bunker, which I think is going to be the most difficult part of the build. And the reason being is because I think I'm going to have a really hard time getting the air hammer back in here to set these rivets. I can get the ones on the bottom just fine, and I can get the one on the top, but I think getting in this corner with the gun is going to be a little bit difficult. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clecos out and pull this assembly out and rivet the corners to the side bunker sheets, because I know I can get in here, and I know I can get in from the top, and then the bottom I can hang the tender off the end of the table to get the rivets. It's just this little corner right here. So I'm going to rivet those, and then we'll drop it in, and we'll put some rivets in to hold everything together, and we're kind of just going to work our way around it. There's also some brass angle that comes up here to hold the top sheet. I don't think that'll be an issue to get in there with the rivet gun. You'll see in just a second I've got a hammer head that's got a little bit of an angle to it. So I'm going to pull these clecos. We'll just rivet these together on the bench and then drop it in as one assembly. Something to mention for those of you building this at home, there is some very critical part alignment here, and if you rivet it wrong, you're going to be having a very bad time. You can see on this side bunker sheet, and basically the whole tender, that the holes that are on the top are spaced further from the top than they are on the bottom by probably about 1/4 of an inch. What I'm getting at here is you don't want to rivet this corner piece on upside down. That would be a bad time. It doesn't look like the holes line up here, but just something to kind of consider. And another thing to consider too is that these side bunker sheets, they fit in behind the material, and you're going to have a left bunker sheet and also a right bunker sheet. It's really important that your part alignment is correct, because if you rivet these in wrong, it would not be a good time. And if I do that, I'm just going to be throwing this whole thing in the trash and starting over. So I'm going to put clecos in these right now because I know they're correct. I'm going to just check them one more time, and then we'll rivet everything together. I'm going to bring the tender over one more time before I do this, just to make sure that they're correct. And they indeed are. So I'm going to go ahead and start dropping rivets in here and get this done. This is where I really wish I would have read my instructions instead of just setting fire to them. Well, kind of. Riveting these bunker sides to the rear bunker corners on the bench was definitely the way to go. I initially thought I'd be able to get the air hammer in between the water legs using the angled rivet head driver that I have, but it was extremely difficult to get my air hammer in there and to set all the rivets correctly. Since I'm building 2 tenders at the same time, I can show you what I mean. On the 36-inch tender, I started by riveting one of the bunker sheets to the floor pan and the front water leg to the bunker corner. I then mirrored this assembly on the bench and then riveted the entire assembly to the floor pan and then riveted the rear bunker sheet in place. This is by far the best way to do it. There just isn't hardly any room in between the water legs to drive the rivets when everything is assembled, so building this assembly on the bench allows you to set the rivets way easier. I struggled for far too long on the 30-inch tender, so I would highly recommend starting with the water legs and finishing up the front end before putting the side panels together. I don't know if you can tell by the amount of clamps that are on this tender that I'm straight up not having a good time right now. None of these holes that I drilled are lining up, and it seems like everything's kind of out of square. If I would have read the instructions, it says to assemble your bunkers with these curved parts off the bench and then put the sides on and rivet everything together, but I'm illiterate and don't know how to read. But I think I am getting to the point where things are sort of starting to line up. There's been a lot of hammering and riveting and swearing involved in this little project. So I think now I'm just gonna re-drill all of my holes because, like I said, none of my holes lined up, but that's okay. I will prevail. It's okay. There will be choo-choos at some point. Maybe after I'm dead. I don't know. This goes without saying that this is loud. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you have hearing protection or in my case, I'm just using earbuds. So why don't we go ahead and get back to riveting. All that was left to do now was to drive in the rest of the rivets along the rear bunker sheet and finish up the bunker corners. With that complete, I could rivet the remaining brass strips to the bunker sides, completing the assembly of the tender body. And now we could start working on the tender top. After what feels like 400 years, we have all of the rivets done on both the Fitchburg Northern tender tank and the 10-wheeler tender tank. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start working on getting the top installed. As you can see, there's quite a few holes that are on the top of this tender. Not all of them are gonna have screws in them, only a few. We wanna be able to take this lid off in case we need to service anything that's inside. So I'm gonna start off by drilling and tapping my holes with the screws, and then we'll come in and countersink the brass for where the false rivets are gonna go later. So for me to do this, I'm just gonna come in here and I'm just gonna make a mark everywhere that I want an actual screw. I'll drill, tap, install the screws, and then we'll go all the way around and put in all the rivets. And then we should be pretty much done, at least assembling these tender tanks. Once I had the locations of all my screws marked, I went around and drilled all the way through the tender top and the brass strip with the tap drill, and with that complete, I could tap on my holes and get ready to set the cosmetic rivets. All right, we match drilled and tapped all of our holes. These are supposed to be 440 screws, but I didn't have any, so I decided to use a bunch of 3mm screws that I had left over, but essentially the holes are exactly the same size. It's just metric versus standard. Something that I wanted to mention is that the holes that the screws go into need to be just a little bit bigger than the holes where the rivets will go. So I'm just clearing these out with an 1/8 inch, but I'm doing it after I match drilled, and that's because I was using these holes as a reference to line up everything really nicely. So I think this is the best way to do it. Match drill all your holes, drill, tap, and then clear them out, bolt it down, and then you'll see here in just a second, we're just gonna go through and peck where the rivets are gonna be. We'll countersink this brass strip here so that when we have our cosmetic rivets on here, it'll sit all the way flush against it because of that countersink. So I'm just gonna go around here, and I'm just gonna clear out these holes. There we go. So we've got all these holes are drilled out. So now our 3mm or 440 screws should slide down in there pretty easily. I'm gonna reinstall this and we'll get to the cosmetic rivets next. All right, so we have our top installed, all the screw holes lined up, which is fantastic. So now I'm just gonna take my number 40 drill and I'm just gonna go along. I'm not gonna drill all the way through the brass here on the underside. I'm just gonna give it a little peck just so that I can locate the hole. And I'm gonna go all the way around the tender. You can see in this shot, I'm just match drilling all the holes that will receive rivets with a small drill bit. This step is really just to mark the location of the cosmetic rivets to show me where to make countersinks on the brass strip below. So after messing around with crappy countersinks, I ended up just grabbing a 5/16 drill bit, and you can see that the end there is tapered, so it's essentially doing the same thing. I'm just drilling enough to give it a nice little countersink. It's a lot faster. We've got all the countersinks done, and now we're gonna go ahead and start putting in our cosmetic rivets. I'm just gonna drop it in and rivet it just like I've done everything else, and then once all the cosmetic rivets are in, we'll flip it over and we'll grind it down so that they fit down into the countersinks nicely, and this whole thing will sit pretty nice. So another reason that I did put in the screws before countersinking the rivets is because I didn't want to put them in the wrong hole. And because we cleared out the hole for the screws just a little bit, when you drop your rivet in there, there's a lot more play than there is in all the other ones. So that should be a pretty good signal that you're about to drop a rivet in the wrong hole. Lego! Wait, I need my bucking bar first. Hold on. Here it is. Installing the cosmetic rivets on the top sheet is pretty simple. I've driven a lot of rivets up to this point, so this step was a breeze compared to riveting the tender body together. Once all the rivets were driven, I came back with an angle grinder with a grinding wheel on it and ground the back of the rivets down fairly close to the tender top. Be careful not to take too much material off the rivet back when doing this. You don't want to end up losing a rivet because the tail is all gone. You can see we've got all of our rivet backs driven down, and I think it should work out pretty good. I'm just gonna drop this in here. We'll go around and put all the screws in and see how she sits. I'm thinking it's gonna sit pretty flush, so we're getting pretty close to being done, at least with the riveting part of this. With that complete, we could finally attach the top to the tender body, set the tank on the nice tender frame and deck we made in the last few videos on this channel, and get a nice look at the progress we've made on this tender over the last few months. We might as well put the air tank on here so you guys can visualize why we had this tender deck just a little bit longer there on the back. I love seeing my projects sitting on rails like this. It gives me a nice preview of how the model will look when it's rolling down the tracks sometime in the future. Jeez. Well guys, I think that's a wrap on this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow along with my 2.5-inch Fitchburg Northern steam engine build or my solar 10-wheeler build, hit that subscribe button because I'll have a bunch more videos coming out showing step-by-step how I assemble both of these steam engines and at some point get them running down the tracks. We still have a lot of work to do on these tender tanks, so in the next video we're going to be focusing on installing all of our tender tank valves, which will supply a metered connection of water to the locomotive itself. Until I see you guys again, stay classy and happy railroading. Catch you in the next one.